With inflation running higher, is now a good time to retire? This is a question we've been getting a lot, and with good reason. Inflation is running high. It's impacting all of our lives in significant ways. Some of the things we want to look at today is how does inflation impact major retirement expenses? What happens to a FERS pension and Social Security income with inflation? How will your investments be able to keep up? And are you willing to make changes to your expectations if we need to? Now, of course, inflation in general sense is just a rise in prices and the erosion of purchasing power of your money. The problem is when prices rise too fast, growth can't keep up, our incomes can't keep up, things get a lot more expensive, becomes a big problem, especially in those retirement years when your income may not be able to keep pace. So we hope this is a temporary issue. The reality is we don't know how long higher inflation is going to persist. Economic forces like reshoring production, newer health protocols, a tight labor market, and of course, supply shocks have all been impacting inflation, keeping it at higher levels. So what can we do? Let's take a look at how major retirement expenses may be impacted. So look, inflation is sticky and it's gonna be here longer than we might like. I think that's just the reality of it. So it's smart for us to go ahead and plan with that in mind. Inflation is going to run higher than the 2% Fed target. It's going to be higher than the long-term average, 3 to 4%, whatever you look back in history. So let's plan for that. Let's project our retirement expenses. Let's use numbers 4, 5, 6, 7% and see what that does to our retirement expenses. Then we can go ahead and look at the income and see how things match up. Things like housing. That's going to have an impact, of course, especially from a property tax standpoint, from an insurance standpoint. Medical costs have risen substantially. I think they're going to continue to do that. Taxes are indexed for inflation to some extent. Indexing is not perfect. Outside of that, food, entertainment, travel, all of those things are based on demand. That may subside a little bit over time, but if those are things we want to do, let's just play it safe and project for higher expenses so we can see how things will play out in the long term. Bottom line here, this is not an exact science. Things are unpredictable, but let's just take an approach where we're planning for those higher expenses. So what happens to a FERS pension and Social Security income if inflation continues to run higher? The good news here is both these income sources are going to be indexed for inflation. The FERS pension, of course, is tied to the CPI-W index. It works like this. If the index is at or under 2%, you get whatever the increase in the CPI index is as your cost of living adjustment. If it's over 3%, you take a 1% haircut. So just kind of works as CPI minus 1 in those instances. The thing with FERS is it doesn't kick in until you're 62. So if you're planning for an early retirement, this is a big consideration. Your income is not going to be adjusted with those increases until you hit 62. Social Security, on the other hand, is indexed for inflation. Of course, the earliest age you can claim that, again, is age 62. You will get the full amount of whatever the CPI-W index is. Now, I know this isn't perfect. It may not match your situation exactly, but it is something. It's a nice hedge for this portion of your retirement income. At least we're getting some cost of living adjustments. All right, so the next part of this is determining what we're going to need from other income sources. It's not uncommon for federal employees to replace 50 to 60% of their pre-retirement income based on Social Security and FERS, like we just talked about. They will be indexed for inflation. But what do you need to make up the rest to match those retirement expenses? So you're going to need to take distributions from things like a TSP account, an IRA account, investment accounts, rental properties, etc., other assets that can produce income. And how much are you going to need? How much can you actually take from those investments without the risk of outliving your money? So from a general sense, we can use the 4% rule, which says if you take 4% distribution from your principal, there's a high probability you won't outlive your money. So we'd basically just take the account value times 4%. That's your income each year. That can be sustainable. So what does your income look like when we add all these sources back together? You got FERS, Security, as well as your investment income. And how does that match up against your expenses? Now, if things don't go perfectly, are you going to be at risk of outliving your money, depleting your capital? And what if inflation continues to run at a higher clip? How can these investments keep pace? All right, so how can we plan to keep up? One of the first things we hear from people when they're considering that transition into retirement is, I can't afford to lose any money. And I completely get it, but that mindset can be damaging because we need our assets to keep up with inflation so that the purchasing power of your money continues to keep pace and potentially grows. That means not being too conservative with your investments. That means building a portfolio that matches what your needs are, right? So a smart way to approach this, if you're in retirement, may be to consider income first, right? So set aside 12 months of living expenses in a cash account, something that's super liquid and secure. Then put away 2 to 5 years of living expenses in shorter term investments, things that are going to be stable, maybe pay a little bit more than cash. And then around that, build a diversified portfolio using well-diversified, high-quality equity positions and really just building a nice mix that's going to give you a balance. The key is to stay invested. I know a lot of times we think we can time the market, we think we can get in and out at the right times. The reality is it's incredibly difficult to do, and it can be really damaging to a retirement portfolio and to your retirement income. All right, let's try to bring this full circle and answer the original question, is now a good time to retire? Hopefully when we sit down and look at the numbers, things come out in your favor and you have good cash flow. If you're cutting a little close, it might be smart to delay things. We've had folks who want to remain in federal service. They'll look for, they'll get creative, right? So they'll look for telework opportunities, reduced hours. This way, you can continue to work towards that 1.1% multiplier at age 62. You keep your high 3 in place, you collect a paycheck, you make contributions towards your investment accounts. So that can be a good situation to continue to pad your retirement income streams. If you don't want to remain in federal service, look for something you're passionate about. You can still collect a paycheck, make contributions towards investment accounts, retirement accounts, as well as defer Social Security, and get things to continue to increase that way as well. So it could be a good option to delay things. If you're retiring before age 62, I think it's amazing. It just takes a little bit of careful planning, and every situation is different. So it really depends on those unique numbers. Now, of course, higher inflation will not last forever, but it's certainly presenting some challenges now. A little bit of careful planning can go a long way in helping you make that decision if now is the right time to transition into retirement.